Hey guitar playing champions, today I teach you how to not only sweep pick fast, but more importantly, how to connect arpeggios together fluently. Because learning to shred through arpeggios fast is great, but if we can't yet connect them together smoothly, then what good are they really? Hi, I'm Tom Hess, and when I first learned how to sweep pick arpeggios, all I wanted to do was be able to play them fast and clean. But once I finally learned how to do that, I realized I was unable to connect them together fluently. And that was really frustrating. So after much struggle, I finally figured out why I couldn't connect them smoothly. And once that happened, guitar playing and shredding through arpeggios became a lot more fun. Now, I've taught this same little tricks to thousands of my private online students over 30 years, and today I'm going to share part of that with you. So grab your guitar and let's rip through some sweep picking arpeggios. All right, so I'm going to begin by playing some D minor arpeggios on the first three strings, and we're going to be going through the different positions or the different inversions and trying to connect them together smoothly. So that should sound something like this. So what we're trying to do now is avoid a hesitation between the first one and the next one, and a hesitation between that one and the next one. Okay, so if sweep picking is new to you, then I'm going to suggest that you go watch another video I have on YouTube called Beginner's Guide, How to Sweep Pick the Right Way, because that video will help you with sweep picking if you're unfamiliar with it. Now, before we can get into how to connect the arpeggios together, we first need to talk about the very first arpeggio that you see on the screen now, because that one uses a technique called the rolling or finger rolling technique. So you'll notice that the first three notes are all played on the 10th fret on three different strings, and we're going to use the same finger. And what we want to avoid here are the notes bleeding together. So we don't want to do like a bar chord and hear this. That's not the sound we're really looking for. So to avoid getting those strings or those notes bleeding together, we need to separate them, but we still want to use the first finger for all three of those strings in this case, because it's going to be the most efficient and most effective way to play those notes. Okay, so we don't want to try and do this or, cram different fingers in there. It's going to be very awkward, especially then to get to this note here. We just want to use the first finger. So this is a technique called the finger rolling technique. If this is unfamiliar to you, if you don't know how to do this, I've got another video on YouTube called Sweep Picking Lesson, Finger Rolling Arpeggios, and you might want to go check out that video because that will help you to play the very first arpeggio that we're working with here, this D minor one here. All right, now for each of our three D minor arpeggios, you'll notice that I'm not playing 16th notes or 32nd notes or 16th note triplets known as sextuplets. I'm playing these arpeggios in groups of 7. So if you look at the notation on the screen, you'll see each arpeggio is 7 notes long. That's called a septuplet, S-E-P tuplet, septuplet. Okay, why? Why do it in groups of 7 instead of groups of 6, which would be pretty common for these sorts of arpeggios? Well, the reason is when we want to connect the arpeggios together, okay, and if we played the first one as a group of 6 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we would end up with our first finger on the second string. Okay, now that's not a problem yet, but if you look at what's going to happen next, when we play our next arpeggio, we need our first finger to start on the third string, 14th fret. Okay, so not only would we have to change frets, we also have to change strings with the same finger. Now, I'll tell you, you can do it. It's not impossible or anything, but it's much harder to do it that way. Okay, so if that's where we end up, now the next note has to be over here. That's going to be difficult for the transition for the fretting hand. Okay, so that's one reason why I've put these in groups of 7. So when we play it in 7 notes, we end up this way. Now our first finger ends up on the 3rd string, and that's the same string that we need to start the next arpeggio. We still have to shift up from fret 10 to fret 14. That part we're not going to get away from. We still have to do this, but now we're at least on the same string, and we don't have to cross strings as we move up the guitar neck. So that will make that transition much easier. Also, if you notice the picking, okay, look what would happen if we stopped after playing only 6 notes. We'd have an upstroke on string 2, okay, the 6th note on the screen. That would be an upstroke. And now from here, we would like to be able to start the next arpeggio on the 14th fret with a downstroke. But our pick just hit string number 2, okay? And now we'd have to jump over string 3 without touching it to start the 14th fret on the G string with a downstroke. Now again, this is not impossible. You can certainly do that, but it would be much more convenient and much easier if we played a note on string 3 with an upstroke. And there it is, note number 7, the 7th note you see, 10th fret of the 3rd string is an upstroke. And now look what happens. As we shift up, our picking hand is already perfectly in position to start the next arpeggio, which begins on the 14th fret of the 3rd string. And you can do that with a downstroke. It is very easy. So, by changing the arpeggios from groups of 6, which would be very typical, to groups of 7, we make the transition between connecting each arpeggio easier for the fretting hand and easier for the picking hand. Now, there is one thing that does make this a little bit harder when you play the arpeggios in groups of 6. In groups of 7 instead of groups of 6, and that's you've got to play faster, okay? So when you cram in an extra note, a 7th note, in order to play this in time with the beat, you now have to actually go faster than you would if you played only 6 notes. But even though you need to increase the speed will feel much easier, even though it's a higher speed. This higher speed, when you play 7 notes, will feel easier. It will be easier to play than the speed that you'll need to play 6 notes. The speed would be lower to play 6 notes, but it's harder, okay? When you balance the two things out, play faster, but the speed is easy, or play a little slower, but the speed is harder, this one's going to be a lot easier to do, okay? So you can do whatever you want, but I'm just showing you a little trick here, how to connect the arpeggios more smoothly. Even though you're playing slightly faster, it's a whole lot easier. Okay, so when you put them all together, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Our first finger and our pick is perfectly in position to play the first note of the next arpeggio, 14th fret on the 3rd string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Same thing happens here. First finger is on the 14th fret of the 3rd string. We just did an upstroke with our picking hand, and now we're already in position to go up to the next arpeggio, which is going to start on the 19th fret with the 3rd finger this time. But our pick is already there. It's already available and right in position to play the next arpeggio. So it's much, much easier putting the arpeggios in groups of 7 and getting both hands in position to make the transition. And again, you can do it the other way. You could put make 6-note phrases, play the 16-note triplets, which is very common. Nothing wrong with that. It's just going to be a little harder. And I'm showing you an easier way to connect these arpeggios. Now let's look at an example where our hands are going to be out of position as we try to shift through the different arpeggio inversions or different arpeggio shapes. So let's imagine we have this. We have D minor in root position. Okay, so I'm playing the first 4 notes. So now our 3rd finger ends up on the 19th fret of the 3rd string. And we need our 4th finger, our little finger, to play on the 17th fret of the 1st string. So we're going to go from this to this. It's a very awkward transition. Now, it can be done, and I'll show you what to do here, but this is a good example where the fingers are out of position as you do each arpeggio. Because we have to do what's called crossing. We have to cross. This finger has to go on that side, on this side of this finger, because its next note is over here, okay? And we'll talk about that in a moment, how to get there, all right? But there's something else that's also out of position, and that's our picking hand is way out of position, all right? So we play downstroke, upstroke, upstroke, upstroke. So we're on string 3 now, and the pick is traveling in this direction. But the very next thing it has to do is get all the way over to string 1 and pick in that direction. So that means we're going to have to skip 2 strings, okay? We're on this side of the G string. So now we got to jump over the G string without touching it. Jump over the B string without touching that. And then get to the first string with a downstroke, okay? So this hand is totally out of position, all right? So let's talk about how to solve this or what to do about the picking hand first, and then we'll talk about how to deal with the finger crossing in the fretting hand. So for the picking hand, we've done this. I'm playing a downstroke, upstroke, upstroke. My pick is now over here, and I need to go back over here to string 1, okay? As you move from string 3 to string 1, you want to make sure that the arc that the pick or the picking hand takes is not big. Okay, so you don't want to lift your hand way away, high away from the strings like this, okay? You want this arc to be as small as you can make it, but while still skipping strings 3 and 2, okay? If it's not big enough, you'll hit strings 3 and 2, obviously, and that will cause noise and sloppy playing, and that's not what we want. But if you make it too big, if you arch the pick too big to get back over to the first string, you're wasting a lot of time, and it's going to slow you down. And it also will increase the chance of making a mistake and not getting to the first string on time or with the right articulation and tone, okay? So how would you practice this? You practice it by ignoring this hand, okay? Just take this hand out of it totally and just practice this hand. And watch it. Take your eyeballs and stare at that hand. Okay, and you want to just watch how big is the arc that's being made. And can you make it smaller and smaller and smaller without hitting strings 3 and 2? That's how you develop the string skipping motion for the picking hand. Now let's talk about the fretting hand and what we're going to do now, because as I said before, we end up, after we play the first arpeggio, with our third finger on fret 19. And now we need this finger to play way over here on fret 17. So this has to cross over. Obviously, we're going to have to move our hand down. Now, the trick here really has nothing to do with your hand. And it has everything to do with your eyeballs. Where you look and when you look there is the single most important thing that you need to understand in order to shift the positions. Okay, this is really crucial because if your eyes are not looking at the right place at precisely the right time, there is a very good chance that this finger is not going to get where it needs to go in time. Okay, so once our hand is set up to play the first arpeggio, okay, once we're in position, we don't need to watch this hand anymore. Okay, we know where we are. Assuming you've got the little arpeggio memorized, you don't need to babysit and watch this hand anymore. So what we want to do, once our hand's in position, we want to already be staring with our eyes at the 17th fret because that's where the fourth finger is going to go to begin the next arpeggio. So the whole time I'm watching the 17th fret. I'm staring at it. Still staring at it. And now, once I get in position to play the second arpeggio, once I'm here, I no longer need to watch this, and I need to already be looking at the 13th fret. Why the 13th fret? Because that is where we're going to begin the final arpeggio. Okay? So you always want to be watching ahead of where your hand is, okay? So once we're in position, I'm already watching this because that's where the pinky's going to go. I'm still staring at it. Once I get to it, I stop looking here and I start watching the 13th fret because that's where the pinky's got to go next. So I'm still staring at it. Okay, so that's how you get yourself to smoothly connect arpeggios when your hands, either hand, might be out of position. Either the picking hand's out of position, or the fretting hand's out of position, or both. In this case, both are out of position. All right, now let's talk a little bit more about how to practice this stuff. How would you learn how to sweep pick fast and connect arpeggios together in a fluent, smooth way when you're going through the different shapes or different inversions of, various arpeggios? The main piece of advice I have for you is this. Although you have to master the individual arpeggios, that you're going to need to connect later on, don't wait until you've mastered each little arpeggio in isolation before trying to put them together. That is a big mistake. I see it among students all the time. They think in a very linear way. First, I've got to do this and master this. Then I do this and master that. Then, no, wrong. This is not physics or math or a chemistry where you've got to learn this before you do this. You got to learn that. The music and art forms, even the technical side, really isn't like that most of the time. My suggestion for you is to work on smoothly connecting arpeggios together even before you've mastered all the motions individually, okay? So don't think in a linear way here, okay? There's nothing worse than having a skill and not being able to use that skill because you can't integrate it or connect it with anything, all right? That's very frustrating. I mean, if you feel frustrated because you haven't mastered something, believe me, you'll feel way more frustrated after you have mastered it, but you can't use it, can't connect it, can't integrate it. That makes you feel like you're a beginner all over again, even though you're not a beginner and you have good skills, but we're not able to use them yet. Now, let me ask you a question. Doesn't it drive you crazy when the songs or guitar solos or exercises that you play on guitar sound good on one day, but sound bad the next day? Now, we've all had this problem, and it's super frustrating when you can't rely on your guitar skills to be consistent and dependable in every situation. So, for example, when you're trying to record yourself, or maybe you're jamming with your friends, or other people are watching you play, it's in those situations when you really need to play at your best, right? But that's usually the time when your playing tends to fall apart a bit and you're not able to show people what you can really do. Well, fortunately, it's simple to solve this problem by training the consistency of your guitar playing. Now, there are little known but proven effective guitar practice strategies you can use to close the gap between how well you play on your best days and how poorly you play on your worst days. We want to close that gap so there really isn't a gap, so you're consistently playing at your best when it matters most. Now, I've got a free guide. You can download it. It's totally free. Download my free guide right now. It's called Guide to Playing Guitar Accurately, Consistently, and Reliably, even on your worst days. Click on the link below to download your copy right now.